Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're going to bring you a preview of an upcoming Kickstarter. Now, this has been a strange ride, David, because over the past year, we've seen Riot Games bring in Mechs vs. Minions. They've been a huge video game maker. Now we have Weta Workshops, and if you guys don't know who Weta Workshops is, these guys are fantastic builders of props, and they've contributed
Effects,
to a ton of
all
movies.
sorts of things. Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and now they're getting into the board game arena with a brand new game in conjunction with Cryptozoic games, and this one's called Giant Killer Robots
Heavy Hitters.
And this thing is a prototype that we have in front of us, but I gotta say, man, this thing looks fantastic.
Yeah, we get a lot of good prototypes. This thing is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Like these heavy hitters are, I mean, I can't imagine these aren't nearly finished.
Yeah. Now, this is a prototype that we played through, and when we first got the game, probably about a month ago, the rules have changed quite a bit in that time. So we're going to be talking to you about not only the game that we play, but the game that's coming up, too.
Right, we haven't been able to play it sort of incorporating a lot of those rules. We've talked to them, and they're adding more to it. And what we've played so far is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So honestly, looking forward to some of the things they're implementing.
Yeah.
There are some of the things that we, too, I think, identified, like, oh, this would be cool, and they're doing a lot of that stuff as well.
Yeah. So the whole idea behind the game is that each of the players is taking on the role of a corporation in the future, in which they are vying for salvaging rights in these old, broken-down cities.
Right.
In order to do that, they have to combat each other with these giant killer robots.
Right, they've turned it into a sport.
I know, exactly. So the whole idea is that you want to kill either the other player's giant killer robot, their heavy hitter, or you want to tag buildings with graffiti, so to speak.
Yeah.
So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking your heavy hitter out there, rolling dice, using weapons, primary weapons and secondary weapons to blast the other player's giant killer robots. And there's not just the heavy hitter, but each of the players also has 3 support characters, and they come in a combat droid, a repair droid, and then a recon droid.
Yeah, like a scout, yeah.
And they all have their own unique combat abilities, movement, range that they can attack, and the abilities that are built into them. For instance, the repair droid not only can attack, but he can also repair your heavy hitter.
Right, and what's cool about the damage that your heavy hitter takes, it's all based on this deck of cards that you have. And there will be an even more significant sort of, not deck building in the game, but at the beginning of a game, you're going to be sort of selecting some cards out of all the cards that you can choose from to build your deck.
So how that works is that each player will come into the game with their heavy hitter and then all the correlating support units, but they'll also come with a stack of cards. And in those cards, they have to choose 25 cards to use in that game. How that's done is that each of the heavy hitters will have 2 primary weapons, and they'll have to choose between one of those 2 primary weapons to use in that game. And they also have 4 secondary weapons, and they'll have to choose 2 of the 4.
Those,
And these weapons range from energy weapons to ballistic weapons to missile weapons. And they all do different things, with the unique one being the missile ones, because they don't need direct line of sight. They can shoot over buildings and around corners and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, so what's cool is you can really dictate the flavor of how you're going to approach the game.
Yeah.
Because the missiles will behave quite a bit differently than, direct energy weapons.
Yes.
You have to get right in front of someone, basically, for a lot of the direct energy weapons, whereas one cool combo we've been able to pull off is sending your scout or recon unit out so he can make a visual of the opposing heavy hitter, and then you can shoot your missiles as long as you have that location from anywhere, which is really, really cool.
Also in the deck, you will be placing 5 deploy cards. Deploy cards allow you to bring out your support units within 2 spaces of your heavy hitter, and you're going to have a range of other cards, 7 other cards that you'll be able to use. This can be orbital strikes, they can be maneuver,
little maneuvers where you can shift around really quick.
And then there's also reactions, which are kind of like interrupts. So the way the game works is there's 5 phases in the game. And each player in turn order will go through those 5 phases. Now, the game can be played 2 to 4 players. We've only had experience with 2 players because that's all of the mechs that we've been sent. But we've seen prototype concept art of a 4-player game, and it looks fantastic.
4-player game, I can't wait to play that.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll be an even better game with 4 players because the chaos, it's not all directed at just each other.
Yeah.
You can split it up. You can kind of do your own thing, maybe just tag a lot of buildings while everyone else is fighting. That's going to be an interesting dynamic when you bring 4 players into it.
So at the start, each player will deploy their heavy hitter on their side of the board. They can place it on any of the back hexes. starting with the Glory Hound player and then the other player. And the first thing that happens is there is a deploy phase. During the deploy phase, you can, if you have a deploy card in your hand, spend 2 energy. Now, the energy in the game is awesome. Each of the players is going to have a player board where they're going to put their deck of cards, their discard pile, and then any of their damage. And as David alluded to at the very beginning, your deck is your life. So as you use cards, they go to your discard, but as you take damage, they either have to be taken from the top of your draw deck or from your hand into your damage. So your systems will naturally go down.
Yeah, it makes
as the
damage,
the game goes.
It makes the damage way more painful than just purely ticking off points because you're giving up cards. Sometimes you don't want to give up a card in your hand. So you take one off the top of your deck, and it might even be a worse card that you don't want to get rid of.
So deploy phase. Let's go back to deploy phase.
Yeah.
You use 2 energy. Each player will start with 5 energy on every round. Now the energy in the game is really, really cool. You have a tracker on the right side of your board that says 5, and it goes all the way to -5. You can use 5 energy anytime during your turn. Those will be going to use to move your heavy hitter. They're going to be used to fire off your weapons and even to do special abilities within the game. However, you can push your mech harder and take critical damage when you do so. Anything below the 0 into the negative range, you have to actually damage yourself by removing cards from your deck or from your hand. But it allows you some more movement with your heavy hitter, allows you to fire off more weapon systems.
Yeah, if you're really trying to pull off that one big attack, where you need to move to get into position, so it's going to use energy, and then you have maybe an attack that uses 3 and more energy.
Right.
That's a lot of energy in this game. It's going to take you south of 0 for sure.
Yeah. So deploying, you're allowed to deploy 1 of your support units within 2 hexes. If you don't have a deploy card in your hand, you can spend 4 energy in order to do so. It's a heavy cost, but sometimes you need those support units out to be able to tag buildings and whatnot for you. The second thing is that in turn order, once again, you are going to move your units.
Yeah, what's cool here is you're not moving all of your units at once.
Yes.
So you start with your heavy hitters. So if I'm the Glory Hound, which is the name of the first player,
Right.
You're going to move your heavy hitter first, then Jeremy would move his. And then it goes just down the row.
Yeah.
Then to the combat unit, the repair unit, and then the scout recon unit.
So to move your heavy hitter, it costs energy, and you can move it as far as you wish. Again, paying the cost if you move it into the negative. Your support units have built-in movement already, so they don't cost any of your heavy hitters energy. You're going to be moving to jockey your guys into position because there's line of sight rules in this, and there's also the missile line of sight that we talked about as well as getting your giant killer robots in positions to tag buildings. We'll get into tagging in a moment, so you're going to be wanting to be close to these buildings as you're moving throughout the city. The next thing is not done in turn order. This is the combat round. Now, each player will have 6 cards in their hand at the beginning of the round. They're going to pick which cards they wish to use, as well as their support units that are on the board, and they're going to put them in their hand and put them face down. When each player has placed their combat cards face down, they reveal them. Now, what's really cool about this is that each primary and secondary weapon, as well as all the support units, have a weapon stat to them. It tells them whether they're ballistic, energy, or missile weapons, but they also have a speed on them.
Yeah, weapon speed, which is basically the initiative. So you order them out from highest to lowest, and then whoever has the next highest number is the one who takes their turn. What
happens first, though, is that each player is going to look at all the energy on the cards they've used, and they're going to have to expend that energy right then, before they even get to fire the weapon. And that's important because there's sponsor cards that can come in and negate some of those cards from being used. So, in numerical order from the highest to the lowest, each player is going to fire off their weapons, or try to fire off their weapons. Weapons are done by dice-based combat. So you're going to be rolling dice depending upon what you're trying to fire, the position of what you're firing against, and what kind of unit it is. And you're going to be trying to hit higher than a specific number. For instance, you always roll 2 dice during an attack. If you're attacking a heavy hitter, you have to have a 5 or higher to hit them. If you're attacking a support unit, you have to have a 7 or higher to hit them. Now, there's mitigations for whether or not behind partial cover.
There's cards that you can use, all sorts of things. The cool thing about the partial cover and the line of sight in this game is it's not really fiddly. You know, there's not any strings or anything that you're like, lining up with rulers or anything like that. It's all based on this hex-based grid.
Yeah.
And once you learn it, it's very easy. You're basically taking the shortest route via the hexes to your target. And if none of the shortest routes go through a building, you've got clear line of sight as long as he's within range. If even one goes through a building,
You have partial cover.
You have partial cover.
Yep.
So it's really just that simple, which makes it nice. These games, to me, a lot of them in the past, that fiddly aspect of getting the rulers out and all that sort of stuff. I know there's a ton of people out there who love that.
Yeah.
And God bless them.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of them.
Sure.
So I really appreciate when they do something like this.
Yeah. So during the combat, if they hit you with their roll, the defender is allowed to do an armor save. And for each of the weapons, they have an amount of damage that they do. For instance, if I rolled a 5 or higher against this heavy hitter with a primary weapon that does 7 damage, that would do 7 damage to his heavy hitter. But he has a chance to save 7 of those hits by rolling dice. Now, each of them have an armor save value as well. He's going to be rolling dice, and for each value that he hits over that, again, there's a bunch of mitigators in there that will allow that number to change. He saves those damage so he doesn't have to do them. You're going to go in turn order through all the different weapons that fire and all the different combat units that fire. And then the next phase is the tagging phase.
Right.
The tagging phase is cool. If your mech is adjacent to a building, he's allowed to tag one of the buildings that he's adjacent to by placing one of his tags onto the building that it is close to. Tags are basically you putting up like some graffiti on a building, so to speak, to say, hey, I've been here, right?
Yeah, laying your claim, as it relates to the theme, you're really trying to lay your claim to this building because you're going to salvage it.
Yes.
And, like Jeremy said, you can have your heavy hitter, even your support units can be around various buildings.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to put a tag on any, basically facing part of the building at the top here, any of your units. Now, the cool thing about this is you can surround a building and tag the heck out of it.
Yes.
And as soon as you have 4, you've claimed that building.
Right.
But the cool thing about tagging is you get the sponsor cards, too, for each tag. But only if you tag different buildings.
Right.
So if you tag all one building with 4 tags with all your units one round, you're only going to get 1 sponsor card. And these sponsor cards are pretty powerful.
They are powerful. We'll get into this in a second. But the other thing that happens when you tag these buildings, if you have 4 tags on a single building, you demolish the building. This is very important because it's one of the game end conditions, either killing the other player's heavy hitter or tagging 4 tags per building of 4 of them.
Yeah, demolishing 4 buildings.
And what you'll do is you'll take the building apart, there's rubble underneath, and you're going to put your tag in that saying that you've claimed that spot, right? If you do that 4 times, you can also win. Getting into the sponsor cards, though, right?
Yeah.
The sponsor cards are really, really cool. They can be played in turn order, depending on, this is why being first player and being the Glory Hound is so important. They're played during specific phases, either during the combat phase, the deploy phase, the movement phase, or whatnot. And they allow you to break a lot of the gameplay rules within there and do a lot of cool things.
Oh, yeah, and they can be pretty powerful.
Extremely powerful.
And like Jeremy alluded to, the whole turn order thing becomes pretty important. But I've found in our few plays that it's not necessarily always the best case scenario to be the Glory Hound.
No, not at all.
In many cases, sometimes you want to go second, particularly when you're trying to move and set up a direct attack.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to move and set up a direct attack, you don't want them to be able to move after you. So basically, you want them to go first and then get into position so you know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's especially true of one of the factions in here that has both primary and secondary weapons that are missiles. It's cool in this game because it gives those players some identity. My guy really has to be at range in order to hit. So if I'm going first, I'm going to position myself in range, but if you're going second, you're going to pull right back into range where my guy won't hit. For instance, some of my missiles only shoot at 3 to 6 range. If they're closer, they can't hit them.
Right. So the cards I was playing with are not exactly the opposite. I had some missile attacks too, but one of my primary weapons was to go right in close and get in there, because being right up next to Jeremy meant a lot of his cards weren't going to do anything to me.
Right.
And I could just pummel him for I think it was 8 damage if successful.
Yeah. And then the last thing that happens is you're going to reset. Each player is going to go back up to 5 energy. They're going to refill their hands up to 6 cards. And then whoever tagged the most buildings, that at the end of the round becomes the Glory Hound. If there's a tie, it's going to pass to the next player to the left of the player that had it in the last turn.
See, that's kind of an interesting way to control the Glory Hound thing.
Yeah.
I know in our initial rules it was a much more random scenario for passing the Glory Hound, but them changing it to the tagging gives you some control. Like, if you don't want that Glory Hound because of the cards you have coming up in your hand, you might actually want to position yourself so you're not going to tag a lot.
Yeah. So one of the issues that we always have with these style of games is it becomes a dice fest.
It does. It depends, and this has that for sure.
Yeah, it depends on how well you roll your dice. But in talking with the designers, we found out after playing this several times that there's 2 new things coming out. There's pilots, which we didn't have, which sounds really, really awesome. Each of your heavy hitters will have a pilot card, which will give you specific benefits, either more armor saves or more attack or whatever it may be.
Right, it's basically variable powers, which we love in all of our games.
That's a huge benefit because you're going to be drafting those in order to mitigate some of the dice issues that come up in these style of games. The other thing that came out that we found out that we didn't get to play with were achievements. You will have a row of achievements that people will be trying to accomplish through the course of the game. For instance, tagging a specific number of buildings or demolishing a specific number of buildings or doing specific types of shots, which will give you an achievement and give all of your units a specific bonus for that game.
Yeah, and I think it makes a game like this, or games like this, more interesting when you have those carrots dangling all around you.
So it's not just a slugfest.
It's not just a slug. I mean, the base game, because you can kill each other or tag the buildings, that's great in and of itself.
Yeah.
Once you add these achievements, now you're like, I'm one of those players who I look over and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, I might forego what I really should be focusing on, but it just sort of disperses your attention on what you want to do and makes the game a little bit more interesting. It opens up little holes for your opponents to take advantage of and for you to take advantage of your opponent.
The last thing we want to talk about, and I know it's probably self-evident from seeing the game, everything here is incredible looking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these mechs are so incredibly detailed, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the mechs are amazing. These bases specifically will be even...
Yeah, they'll have the logo of the corporation painted on them.
A little bit different, a little bit more detailed. But all of these components are going to look amazing. We don't have the rubble either. There is going to be more of a thematic rubble when you destroy a building.
Yeah, these will come off, and then this will all be rubble under here, and you can also put the tag in there when it's demolished. We also have seen pictures of the other mechs that are coming out with the Kickstarter. There's 2 other mechs, so you'll have 4 in the base game, and the value on this is going to be incredible. I've heard the price. I'm not sure it's set in stone. I don't want to announce it unless I hear for sure, but if it's right, it's going to be a huge value for this game. Yeah. So, guys, please go take a look at their Facebook page. Get interested because this is a super, super cool game. We've had a blast with it. It's called Giant Killer Robots Heavy Hitters from both Weta Workshops and Cryptozoic. Coming to Kickstarter, I think, around February 22nd through 24th in that range.
Late this month.
Make sure you guys make comments below. Ask us any questions that you have. That always helps us. Give us thumbs. That's great. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. And everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple. And we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.